It will be remembered that the apex of the cone of energy is the point of north. An elliptical conic section has upon its surface 2 points, one of which is nearest to north and the other of which is furthest from north. The point nearest to north is not only nearer to the moving apex of the cone of energy, which is also the line of the wave, but it is also nearer to the bending axis of the cone. The point nearest to south is not only further away from the moving apex of the cone of energy, but it is also further away from the bending axis of the cone. That section of an eccentric orbit which lies above a circular conic section is the northeast section of an orbit. Conversely, that section which lies below a circular conic section is the southwest section. If the northeast section of an eccentric orbit is that part of the orbit in which the perihelion is located, and if acceleration of an orbit always increases toward its perihelion, then the northeast section of the orbit and its perihelion must in some manner be related to the relative ability of a mass to appear to attract. If the southwest section of an eccentric orbit is that part of the orbit in which the aphelon is located, and if deceleration of an orbit always increases toward its aphelon, then the southwest section of the orbit and its aphelon must in some manner be related to the relative ability of a mass to appear to repel. The acceleration of attraction is always towards the perihelion of an orbit, and the deceleration of repulsion is always toward its aphelon. In any mass, the aphelon of every orbit is the point of maximum exhalation and the beginning of inhalation. In any mass, the perihelion of every orbit is the point of maximum inhalation and the beginning of exhalation. The interval of time between one inhalation of any mass is the standard unit year of that mass. The inhalation impulse of any mass is endothermic, generative, and centrifugal. The exhalation impulse of any mass is exothermic, radiative, and centrifugal. If the perihelion of an eccentric orbit is that part which is preponderantly heat-absorbing and generative, it must necessarily follow that the mass which is traveling toward the perihelion of an orbit is increasingly electropositive. If the aphelon of an eccentric orbit is that part which is heat-discharging and radiative, it must necessarily follow that the mass which is traveling toward the aphelon of its orbit is increasingly electronegative. If the charging and discharging of the northeast section of an orbit is in excess of that of the southwest section, it must necessarily follow that the variation in plane which makes an eccentric orbit possible is related to the attraction of gravitation and the repulsion of radiation. Now, I want to read what is on this page here that has a chart. That's a beautiful chart. It looks like that string art. But anyway, this is a chart that says at the top, the science of crystallography is today without the basic foundation of a fundamental law. It is today but an organized correlation of known effects of unknown causes. It is today beyond the power of man to determine in advance the exact crystallization of any element, compound, mixture, or alloy, nor can cleavage, twinning, or other effects of crystallization be determined in advance of experiment or observation. And this chart has got around it, it says hardness and simplicity, softness and complexity. And there's more at the bottom. It says, by this series of charts, however, of which this is the basic principle, it will be no longer necessary for the chemist or metallurgist to waste precious effort in experimentation. By the application of these simple laws, all effects can be worked out on paper, even to those amorphous effects which cannot be determined by experiment. An application of this series of drawings to the following series, which ties crystallography to chemistry and electricity as a higher chemistry and electrochemistry will greatly simplify the labors of the research chemist. This is a crystallization chart number 1, basic principle of crystallization, in accord with the formula of locked potentials 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I will begin another chapter, and we're getting toward the very end of the book here. Expressions of gravitation and radiation. Crystallization, the 10th dimension. All matter is crystallic. Crystals are the record in form of the state of motion of the potential which produced that form. Solids of matter are but accumulated potential, so therefore all mass is an accumulation of crystals of varying forms. The variation of crystallic form is due to the variation of potential. As matter is but light transformed from speed-time dimension in plane to power-time dimension in mass against resistance which is registered in heat, so are crystals the reaction record of that transformation which is registered in cold. As light accumulates the one substance by the attraction of its generative motion and melts it into the ideal of form according to the dimension of its potential position, so does the reaction of that action freeze it into the appearance of the form which belongs to its potential position. Crystals are records in form of potential position attained by the action of generation. Generative action melts. Radiative reaction freezes. The melting point of any element depends upon its potential position, its pressure environment. Nature, in her economy of energy, prevents waste of her effort of generation by freezing that effort into the record of the position it has attained. Crystals are the frozen records in form of the general active effort of accumulating potential. All potential positions are tonal. All form is tonal. All crystallic forms are records of tonal periodicities. As all accumulating mass is aiming toward perfection in the simple form of the sphere, so the separate tones which constitute accumulating mass are aiming toward perfection in the simple form of the cube. True cubic crystallization can only take place at the overtone position of the wave in the cubes of motion. The journey from plane to mass is recorded by the locking of the successive efforts of energy developed in the attempt to reach that position into the formation of crystals. As the journey from plane to mass is in the direction of resistance, which is indicated endothermically in temperature dimension by greater heat absorption, so is the resistance to mass formation indicated by crystals in a tonal periodicity ranging from softness to hardness. So also this resistance to mass integration is registered crystallically, that's hard to say, crystallically, in a tonal periodicity of form ranging from amorphous complexity to cube simplicity. So also the return journey to plane is registered by a reversal of these tonal periodicities. As the resistance to mass formation is registered in each of the 18 dimensions by equal and opposite positive and negative plus and minus tonal matter, and as crystallization is one of these 18 dimensions, it therefore follows that variation of density of crystallic form is as complex as variation of potential is complex.